Hi, welcome to my channel. For today's video, I'm going to be sharing all of my thoughts on King of Wrath by Ana Huang. So I finally read this book. It had been on my TBR for the longest time, and I finally decided to pick it up, and I did it just in time for the second book in this series. So while I was reading it, I knew I was going to end up doing a whole video dedicated to it because I just really wanted to talk about this book and kind of share all my thoughts on it. So I'm going to go ahead and share what this book is all about and just kind of some general information about the series, and then I'll go into my review afterwards, which will be spoiler free. So starting with some general information about this series, King of Wrath is book 1 in the Kings of Sin series. So this is supposed to be a series of 7 books. So as of now, I've only read book 1. At the point that I'm filming this, book 2 is not out yet, but I'm pretty sure by the time this video goes up it will be. So there's not really like a ton of information about this series. I mean, like, there's just the general information of what it's about, but there's not too many details about what each of the books are about and like who they're about. So I don't really have too much information on that. I just know it's going to be a 7-book series. This book definitely like sets things up, and you can see that there's characters being introduced that are most likely going to have their own books. King of Wrath specifically follows a billionaire. I'm not sure how the other books are going to go, if they're also going to be following like other billionaires. I would assume so because I feel like that's what Ana Huang does. And this is also going to be a series of interconnected standalones, so each book is going to follow a different couple, and you don't have to read them in order if you don't want to. If you want to skip a book, you can. It's recommended to read them all probably, and it's recommended to read them in order just to like avoid any sort of spoilers and just to like get introduced to those characters before their book, but it's not necessary. They can all be read on their own. And this series is also connected to Ana Huang's Twisted series. I did read that series in the past couple years and I really loved it. I did a video about it, but this series does kind of connect to that. You do see these characters in that series initially, but again, you don't have to read the Twisted series to read the Kings of Sin series. So obviously King of Wrath is the first book. This one is on Kindle Unlimited. It is a dual POV book, so you get a perspective from both the main characters. So that was just some general information on this series and on this book, but now I'm going to go into King of Wrath specifically and share what this book is all about. So this book follows Vivian and Dante. We do initially see them in the Twisted series. Like I said, you meet them in book 3, which is Twisted Hate. I'm pretty sure that's their first appearance, and you kind of only briefly see them. You just get like a brief little glimpse of them. You don't really know too much about them, but obviously it was kind of setting things up for this book and this series. And then you also do see a little bit more of them in Twisted Lies, which is the 4th book in the Twisted series. Again, you don't need to read those books to read this one, but that's just where you get like the first glimpse of them. Those scenes that you get of them in the Twisted series, you get to see them again in this book, but from their perspective now. And so the main tropes for this one are arranged marriage. The two of them are put into an arranged marriage together, and then he is a billionaire, she's also very rich, and then it's also forced proximity, and then it's also kind of enemies to lovers, or I guess like hate to love, because they don't really like each other in the beginning since they're kind of being forced into a marriage. So going into like the actual synopsis of this book and what it's like actually about, like I said, it follows Vivian and Dante. And so Dante is this billionaire CEO of this company that was started by his family, and he just kind of eventually inherited that role as he grew up. And so he is a well-known guy. He is known for having a certain reputation and for coming from the Russo family. And so basically Dante ends up being blackmailed into marrying Vivian. Obviously he wants nothing to do with her. He doesn't need her at all to get ahead or anything, but like I said, he's blackmailed into it, so he doesn't really have any other options at this point. But Vivian comes from a new money family, so even though she also wants nothing to do with him and wants nothing to do with this marriage, she agrees to it because she knows it'll help her family out, it'll give them more opportunities, it'll look good for them, and kind of like elevate their status a little bit as a family. And Dante is the perfect person for that just because of who he is and his family, his business, his reputation, and all of that. And she also kind of does it out of duty to her family because of what they've done for her whole life, and just this like need to obviously please her parents and kind of obey what they want for her. So she agrees to it. They both agree to it. They're kind of forced into it. Like I said, they don't really like each other in the beginning. They kind of clash a lot because neither of them really wants to be together, obviously. It's interesting though because she doesn't know that he's being blackmailed. Like, as far as she knows, he was just put into this arranged marriage with her. She doesn't really know like all the circumstances of why he agreed to marry her. And then from his perspective, he's obviously being blackmailed this whole time, so he's trying to figure out a way to get out of this marriage. But obviously as all of this is going on, the two of them are forced together and they're spending more time together, and they obviously start to fall for each other. So that's mainly what this book is about without giving away too much. All of what I said is basically in the back of the book, or it's revealed within the first couple chapters. But yeah, now I'm gonna go ahead and go into my thoughts on the book. So I'll start off by saying that I loved this book. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was so good. I really love Ana Huang. She's one of my favorite authors. I will read anything she writes at this point. So I had a feeling I would like this book because I've enjoyed what I've read by her so far. But this book, I ended up rating it 5 stars, which honestly going into it, I didn't really predict that I would rate it 5 stars just because I kind of assumed this would be a series where you kind of have to like get into it, you know, and like as you read the books, they'll get better. I feel like the Twisted series was kind of like that. Personally, I enjoyed the first book, but with that series, I think as it went on, like the books just got even better. So I kind of was expecting that with this series too. Like I felt like this would be a series where with each book it's going to get better, but with the first book, I really really loved it, and like I said, I rated it 5 stars. I also listened to the audiobook with this one, and I really liked the audio for this one. I thought it was done really well. I liked the 2 narrators that they had. This one was a duet, so what I really liked about it is that when there was conversations happening, the 2 narrators would like switch off and voice each of the characters rather than like one narrator voicing the entire conversation. I haven't really listened to many audiobooks that do that, so I really liked that about this one. But yeah, I just thought they did a good job. I really liked listening to it. But anyway, going into the characters, I did really like them, especially Vivian. I just really loved her. I loved her personality and like the way she interacted with Dante. It was just really fun to read that. I also really liked that she was an event planner, like that's what she did as her job, and I just thought that was interesting because I personally like event planning, so it was just kind of like fun to read that. But yeah, like I said, I just thought she was a very likable character. She was a very strong character. I feel like there were times where you could see that she didn't really stand up for herself, and I feel like with those instances, like it was kind of understandable, but she never let Dante treat her badly. Like she always stood up to him, so I really love that. And of course I really like Dante as well, like the way he was with Vivian, especially when he was falling for her and he didn't really realize it. I just loved how he was just so not interested in her in the beginning, and then you kind of slowly see him fall for her, and like you can tell he was gonna fall really hard for her, but like he just doesn't even know it yet. Like he's just confused on these feelings that he feels towards her, but it's obvious that he is starting to like her and starting to fall for her. And I just enjoyed reading about him too. I liked reading about his family. I thought it was interesting, and I also just really loved the 2 of them together, like the banter, the way that they would interact with each other, especially in the beginning when they didn't really like each other. And of course I loved meeting all the side characters and kind of seeing things get set up for these side characters that you meet in this book to eventually have their own books, especially her friends. I really loved her little friend group. I loved seeing that. I feel like the Twisted series did a really good job at like establishing this like strong friend group of these 4 girls who really love and support each other, and so I liked seeing something kind of similar in this book where they also have a very strong friend group, and I'm assuming they'll eventually get their own books. And of course we meet this other side character named Kai. He is the main character for book 2, and I already loved him from basically the beginning of when we first get introduced to him in this book. But book 2 follows Kai and Isabella, so like I said, Kai gets introduced in this book, and then Isabella is Vivian's best friend. I'm not trying to get too into like book 2 because obviously I haven't read it yet, but anyway, going into this one I knew that they were the 2 main characters for book 2, so I really liked knowing that because you kind of get to see little hints of them throughout this book, and you kind of know that their story is coming next, and it was just really fun to read that too. Another thing I really liked was the overlap that this book had with the Twisted series. I kind of mentioned that earlier, but there are a few scenes in this book that also happened in the Twisted series, and again, you don't have to read the Twisted series to read this book, but like I said, you do initially meet them in that series and you kind of get those scenes in that series first. And so I really liked the way that the Twisted series kind of set this series up and showed certain scenes that we get to see again now from Vivian and Dante's perspectives. It was just interesting to see what was really going on because I feel like in the Twisted series, like I didn't really get what was going on with them, and I just remember specifically reading Twisted Hate and like kind of being confused on who these people were. Obviously I knew it was like setting things up for another book, but yeah, it was just interesting now to actually see what was happening during those scenes and like what was going on with them as a couple, because in the Twisted series you kind of know nothing about them other than the fact that they're engaged. And it's interesting because you see in that series kind of like the tension between them, and obviously you know there's kind of more to their relationship than what we see in the Twisted series. But anyway, something else that's really important in romance books is obviously the way the relationship develops, and in this book I really liked the development of their relationship. I thought it was done really well. I really liked seeing all these small moments between them where they were kind of opening up to each other, and they would have like a conversation and kind of easily be able to open up to each other and tell each other things about their past and just like things that they don't really talk about with other people. And so I liked seeing all those little moments, and obviously after all of those moments they would kind of both pull back a little bit because they realized they revealed too much and they were kind of opening up a little bit too much with each other. So I really liked seeing all of that. I loved the way that he was obviously falling for her and feeling very protective over her. There was a few scenes where he was like kind of jealous, and I just really loved the fact that he was basically falling in love with her and kind of feeling all these like feelings of protectiveness and jealousy towards her, but he didn't really know why. Also, there were multiple instances where he referred to her as his wife. I just loved that so much. Like, they're not even married, they're literally engaged, and he's calling her his wife, and I got very invested in their relationship. Like, I really loved them together, and I just really loved reading their story and seeing how everything developed for them. And there was just so many good scenes throughout this entire book. Like, I just really enjoyed it. I feel like on top of it just being like a good book that I really liked, there was just like a lot of really good scenes that made up this book and made it even more enjoyable. Just like little scenes, little moments that I feel like really added to the story and to the relationship. Something that Ana Huang does in her books that I really like is she always has her main characters go on some sort of trip together, and I feel like every time when that happens in her books, it's always like a huge shift and kind of like turning point in the relationship between the main characters. And so in this one, you obviously get to see them go on trips together, and you see the way that affects their relationship and the changes it makes to them as characters and the way it develops their relationship even further. And so I feel like the scenes that we got in this book that did that were just really good. I really liked them a lot, and I just really like that she does that with all her books. Like that's something that I feel like you can kind of expect with her books. Like you always see the characters go on some sort of vacation together, and I just really like that she kind of adds that in there. But anyway, going into the kind of main conflict of the book and my thoughts on that, obviously I'm not going to share what it is or go into it or anything, but I am going to talk about what I thought about it. So the third act conflict, which happens pretty much in every book, like that's not a spoiler, you know there's going to be some sort of conflict in the end, but I feel like the third act conflict can really make or break a book. Like a book can be so good and then the third act conflict just ruins it. But with this book, I didn't mind it at all. Like I liked the way everything played out. I feel like it made sense. I did really love the aftermath of the third act conflict. I thought it was done really well, like when they're kind of resolving everything. That was one of my favorite parts of the book, I think. And in this book we do see some groveling, and I really loved the groveling in this book. Like it was so good. I feel like Ana Huang she set a standard for groveling for me when she wrote the groveling scene in Twisted Love, and she knows how to write a good groveling scene, I think. And so in this book I just loved it. It was done so well. So yeah, I ended up really enjoying this book. I really loved the way it ended. Like I was very happy with how this story went and the way everything happened, just like the way it ended. It was just a really enjoyable book to me. This book I do think feels very similar to her other books. Obviously it is connected a little bit to the Twisted series, but it does have a very similar feel to it. So I think if you liked the Twisted series, you're more than likely gonna like this book as well. Like if you've enjoyed her book so far, if you like her writing and everything, like I think you're gonna enjoy this book. There are some things that happen in this book that I feel like are a little bit similar to her other stories that she's written, but I still feel like it was done really well. Like I still feel like I was reading something different and reading about different characters and a different story, even though it did kind of feel similar to her other books. But if you haven't read anything by Ana Huang yet, I would definitely recommend starting with the Twisted series. I just think it's a great series, and I also really love that you get to see some of those characters pop up in this one, so it just makes it even more fun, like already knowing and loving those characters and then seeing them in this book. So my personal favorite from the Twisted series and my favorite book by Ana Huang is Twisted Games, but King of Wrath, honestly I almost ranked it as number 2, just like if I were to rank her books, but I do really love Twisted Lies a lot, so I think King of Wrath is like number 3 for me if I were to rank her books, like the 5 I've read so far. Yeah, I just really loved this one a lot. I thought it was a really great book and I just really enjoyed reading it. I'm glad that I finally read it. I had been putting it off for so long. Like I've literally owned a copy of this book since it came out, like back in October, and I'd been wanting to read it and I just never bothered picking it up. I don't know why, but I'm glad that I finally got to it. Honestly, part of me is like I wish I had read this sooner because I loved it so much, but then another part of me is also glad that I waited because now I don't have to wait for book 2. So yeah, I'm really excited to read the next one, which is King of Pride, and I'm excited to see where the rest of the series goes. I know book 3 comes out later this year, I think in October maybe, but yeah, I can't wait to continue on with it as each of the books come out. But those are all of my thoughts on King of Wrath. Let me know any of your thoughts if you've read this book. I would love to hear them. And that's pretty much it for this video. If you liked this and you're new to my channel, I would love it if you would subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.